Hello everybody. I would like to talk to you today about research philosophy and how philosophical foundations inform and frame our actual research. Now, before we get into any of the details, I want you guys to know that the story I am telling today, the information I'm giving, is only part of a bigger story. That bigger story should include Africa and African philosophies and African knowledges and African ways of being. But unfortunately, in the current state of affairs, the whole conceptualization of philosophy and the tradition of research philosophy, together with the ontology, epistemology, axiology, and methodology, as we have it now, as it's been written down, is a story that is mostly Western in origin and serving Western ways. And while we are making strides to center Africa when we do research, and we are incorporating African philosophies and African ways of being and knowing in our paradigmatic positions and worldviews, the frame, the way things have been set up is mostly Western and based in a time and originated in a world that deliberately excluded Africa. I also want you to know that there are many different viewpoints about these things. For instance, something is called a philosophy by one person, but it's called a theory by another. Something is called an ideology by one, but a religion by another. So I am also going to share the way that the terms come to me and the way I understand it. But I want you to keep a space in your mind for different ways of understanding this. Okay, so let's go. Philosophy, Western philosophy that is said to have 5 main branches: metaphysics, epistemology, axiology, logics, and aesthetics. Simply put, metaphysics is the study of existence, the study of being, of the world, and of reality. Those things that are not physical or tangible. Now, ontology is part of metaphysics, where the bigger metaphysics field is about how the world is. Ontology is a branch of metaphysics about the nature of reality. Epistemology is the study of knowledge and how knowledge is gained. Logics is the study of reasoning and how we argue and reason about things. Axiology is the study of ethics and the study of how we should be acting and the study of values. Aesthetics is the study of beauty and art and the senses of life. But these major branches are not just clean-cut just like that. There are also specific philosophical traditions that deal with specific views of one or more of these branches. These traditions are sometimes called disciplinary philosophies. Let's take religious philosophy as an example. Now, religious philosophy mainly belongs to the metaphysical branch of philosophy, as it has to do with those very basic questions about God, about human existence, and our purpose on the planet, and so on. But it also has an epistemology. If you take, for instance, Christian philosophy, for example, that says that knowledge about God and human existence and purpose can be learned from the Bible. It also has an axiology that says that we must value God above all and your fellow humans as yourself. Can you see that this philosophical tradition covers some of the branches, maybe not all of them? Maybe, for instance, logics is less important within the tradition of religious philosophy, or maybe aesthetics is less important. Then you get traditions like political philosophy, ideological philosophy, language philosophy, educational philosophy, and most relevant to us, research philosophy. Now, research philosophy, in essence, I would say, belongs mainly under the branch of epistemology, as research is about acquiring knowledge. So in the bigger scheme of things, research philosophy deals with the sources, the nature, the development, the acquisition, and the dissemination of knowledge. And to some extent, if you are doing research and if you are a believer in research, you already have an epistemology of your own, one that believes that research is at least one source of knowledge and that the systematic ways we work as researchers are a legitimate way to gain knowledge. But if you look at research philosophy, it can't be viewed without understanding something about metaphysics, specifically ontology. Also, logics, how we reason, how we motivate, is different in research than in other aspects of life. We can also not separate research from value systems. Then, of course, as research is about knowledge, ideas about knowledge is prominent. So in research philosophy, despite being a tradition mainly under the branch of epistemology, would have epistemology at the center of how it philosophizes in itself. Important for us today are the concepts of ontology, epistemology, axiology, and also methodology. Now, in practical terms, what makes the study of reality, the study of knowledge, the study of values, and the study of methods important for research? Bagele Chalisa answers us short and sweet. She says, the researcher's perceptions of reality, what counts as knowledge and values, have an impact on the way research questions are conceived, research is approached, data gathering instruments, analysis and interpretation and dissemination of research findings are handled. The way we assume reality is, the way we assume knowledge is, and the way we assume what we should value greatly influence how we will practically do research, how we will interpret our literature and our data, and what kind of work we prioritize, and so on. So it's pretty important, I would say. And as a side note, it's also then pretty easy to see why it's important for us to realize that the way the different paradigms in research philosophy developed, and the way that Africa and other non-Western contexts were not part of the conversation. It's of course important as the whole system only recognized certain ways of being and knowing and certain values when it was conceptualized. Alright, that being said, now let's look at these 4 philosophical assumptions in some more detail. Chalisa says ontology is the study of what it means to exist. Ontology is about what is real. In other words, it's the philosophy about the nature of reality, the nature of science, the science of being, or the science of what exists. Is there only one reality and one truth? Is reality separate from human perception or not? Is reality the same for everybody, or does it differ between people? Can we know everything about reality, or are some aspects hidden? Is reality stable, or does it change over time? Are some realities suppressed and others privileged? Questions like these are all questions about ontology or ontological assumptions. If this is not making a whole lot of sense to you, let me try and explain it by means of 2 examples. The one is a simple example I found on a YouTube video. It is about the concept of a card. Now, in the world of metaphysics, the ontology of cards will be the nature of cards, the study of the reality of cards, the theory of cards themselves. Now, when you get into more specific domains of practice, the meaning of a card and what cards are will be different. For instance, if you are in the world of gambling, a card may mean a playing card in a game of poker. If you are in the field of football, a card will be meaning something completely different. And when you are in the world of computer programming, a card might be something like a graphics card or a sound card or something. So a card will refer to different things in different domains, and it must be described as such. Then for us doing communications research, a more relevant example might be the concept of relationships. What it means when you use the term relationships in your research will depend on how you view the existence of relationships and the nature of relationships. Are relationships only between human beings, Or could they be between humans and the environment, or between the living and the non-living, and not just confined to humans? Can relationships be quantified and put in monetary terms, for instance? Can it be measured and controlled? Both these examples are about the ontology of cards or the ontology of relationships. It is about what it is and how it exists and what those strings are that bind it together in the bigger theoretical and research tradition. It gives a researcher a sense of what is being investigated and what is not being investigated. If you are a football researcher researching cards, you will not look at cards as they are seen by gamblers. If you're an interpretivist researcher looking at stakeholder relationships, you will not see relationships as being measurable or quantified or put in monetary terms, but instead you will see the state of a relationship as being subjective human experience. Epistemology is about what is real knowledge. In other words, epistemology is the philosophical beliefs about what can be known about the world or about reality and about the relationship between the researcher and knowledge. How is it that we know what we know? And how is it that we doubt what we doubt? Epistemological questions are questions about what is or what should be acceptable, legitimate knowledge in a specific context, and can be different depending on the ontological assumptions, the field or discipline. You can determine the epistemological assumptions by answering questions like, what are the sources of knowledge and are they reliable? How does one know when something is true? Are certain knowledges silenced in order to marginalize or oppress people? Do I need proof before I can know something, or is a belief good enough to count as a knowledge? What would be an acceptable knowledge product? And is knowledge an individual thing, or is it a relational, communal thing that is shared between people? In our everyday lives, the complicated topic of religion might be a very good way for us to understand epistemology. If you believe in a specific spiritual scripture, like the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, you essentially believe that that holy book is a credible and true source of knowledge. You will use information from your chosen holy book to inform your life, to base your decisions on, to understand how you know what you know, and to understand why you doubt what you doubt. In research, epistemological questions are asked when we decide which sources are acceptable in a literature review, for instance. You often hear your lecturers say that you may not use Wikipedia, or you may not use a popular website to source theoretical knowledge from. In a data collection sense, our epistemology is also about what kind of knowledge we regard as credible for answering our research questions. If your epistemology is based on empiricism, you will need verifiable, concrete evidence and experience before you will feel that you know something. And you will use verifiability, evidence, experience to justify your arguments. You believe that you know what you know because you can prove it. If your epistemology is interpretivist, you believe that you know what you know because you interpret it that way, because others interpret it that way. And if you have a decolonial epistemology, for instance, you believe that we know what we think we know because the West dominated us, and you will use the ideas of suppression, marginalization, power, and so on to motivate your case for pluriversal truth and deliberately disobey the rules of knowledge production and delinking from Western ways of knowing. Axiology is about our ethics and our values. In other words, axiology is the philosophical principles regarding the presence and relevance of ethics and values in research. Axiological assumptions are those beliefs of a researcher in terms of the meaning of values, the characteristics of values, and whether or not ethical and value-driven knowledge could be regarded as knowledge, and how values influence people's everyday lives and the researcher's approach to knowledge production. In a typical day, we might hear, business is business. That actually says that in business, we don't have to consider right and wrong. We just consider results. That is an axiological statement. We also know sayings like, all is fair in love and war, meaning that we are able to expand our minds to be more accepting of certain behaviors and in a certain context that we won't necessarily be generally accepting of. That is also a specific axiological position. Some researchers assume that knowledge is and should be value-free and neutral. Others are outright about valuing human rights and social justice. For instance, transformational scholars specifically believe that social justice and human rights are the very foundation of their research. An indigenous paradigmatic position assumes a relational axiology, meaning that human relations and respect for others and reciprocal appropriation are central to life and to research. As I said earlier, methodology is about the more practical beliefs of research. Depending on what you believe about reality and about knowledge and about values and ethics, you will also have specific beliefs about how one should go about collecting information, interpreting it, and so on. Methodology asks, how should we study the world? Can you see the links here? Before you can get to the methods of research, you have to first know about your other beliefs and assumptions, as all those other beliefs and assumptions converge to inform your methodological considerations. So everything from your research approach, will it be quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, to your research design, will you use empirical or conceptual or ethnographic or whatever research, to your specific methods, will I use a survey or interviews or observations or content analysis, to the very specific techniques you use for collecting and analyzing your data. All of that grow from your beliefs about the world, about knowledge, and about ethics. Now let's bring it back to where we started. In the big and complicated arena of philosophy, research philosophy is a specific tradition that mainly belongs under the epistemological branch of philosophy, but it also draws on ontology, axiology, and methodology. What we assume about reality, what we assume about knowledge, what we assume about ethics and morals and values, inform the methodologies and the practical execution of our research projects. In the next class session, I will look at how specific combinations of ontological, epistemological, axiological, and methodological assumptions, when seen together in that specific combo, can be called a paradigm or a research worldview that we use to frame and inform our actual applied research. So in the meanwhile, enjoy your reading, and let's check in with each other next week. Bye-bye.